Okay, good morning, everyone. Uh, this is Robert Moyeda. I am the meteorologist in charge at the National Weather Service Miami, South Florida Forecast Office. And this is our one of our yearly, twice yearly outlooks that we do every year. So this is the wet season outlook. Of course, now that we've officially started the rainy season. So we're going to do what we do pretty much every year is to give a quick recap of the dry season, and then look forward to the outlook for the summer and the rainy season. As we've done in the past and this year as well, we're very happy to have the South Florida Water Management District. We have Medahel Ansar. He's the Bureau Chief of Hydrology and Hydraulics. So after I give my outlook, my part of the presentation, which is going to focus on the outlook, Medahel is going to then talk about the outlook from the water perspective, or the water management perspective. And then we're going to have Major Corey Bell from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Jacksonville District. He is going to be presenting. He'll be making a brief presentation right towards the end. And then after that, we will have some time for some questions. We have the chat feature in which you can drop a question when it's time to do that. You can also open up your mic and ask the question as well. So we'll make sure we have some time for that. While you're not speaking or while during the slides, I'll ask if you can mute your line. So that would be much appreciated. I believe we'll have the ability to mute everyone, but if you can do your part as well, I think that will help to make sure we minimize distractions as much as possible. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. So hopefully you're seeing, if you're not seeing the dry seasons, if you're not seeing the slides change, let me know. Just go ahead and just tell me there, but otherwise I'll just continue on. So we've had a pretty dry season. Of course, a dry season by definition, it's, we're not supposed to get too much rain, but even based off the normals, which I'll show you here in a second, it was drier than normal for really virtually the entire season. We feel that the La Nina pattern that was in place during the latter part of the fall of 24 and the winter of 25, that did play a role, or at least help to set the stage for these drier than normal conditions. Basically, most of the fronts that entered the Florida region during the winter and spring that didn't have little of any precipitation associated with it, because of the jet stream that was displaced far to the north, one of the characteristics of a La Nina winter across the United States. So in place of that, we had high pressure in the middle to upper levels of the atmosphere, and that, especially during these last, let's say, 6 to 8 weeks of the dry season, and that's been providing us with a mainly dry easterly wind flow pattern, reinforcing these dry conditions. So this graph here shows the dry season rainfall, and this is courtesy of the South Florida Water Management District. They have some really nice graphics on their website. And this graphic is showing how the 2024-2025 dry season as compared to, let's say, the last 30 plus years here. So the 2024-2025 rainfall, again, averaged across the entire district, which covers almost all of South Florida and even parts of Central Florida, that's that red line down at the bottom. So the red line is labeled 24-25. That's where we were for the dry season. It was the fifth driest dry season on record, and actually it looked like it was the driest dry season, if I'm looking at this correctly, since maybe 2011. So it's been a while since we've had a dry season that's consistently dry as the one that we just had, and really those conditions are still lingering across the area. If we break it up into regions based off different parts of the area, if you just kind of do a general summary of that, we really had only about 50 to 60%, generally speaking, of the average rainfall. So the dry season is 7 months. So over that 7-month period, from the middle of October of 24 all the way to May 15th of this year, most of the area is somewhere in the 50 to 60% of average. So just barely over half of the average. So again, reinforcing the message here that we've had a pretty dry season. And as a result of that, we entered not just drought conditions, but we've entered extreme drought conditions, especially across parts of Southwest Florida and the Everglades. And the new one comes out tomorrow. There may be some changes to that, just to give you a heads up. Not only are drought conditions continuing, they may actually still be getting a little bit worse before they get better. The expectation is, of course, once we start to get the rainy season pattern, then our drought conditions will gradually improve at some point. But I think there's going to be there's some delay, certainly this year. Some years, their pattern starts pretty much right away. The rainy pattern starts right away, and we eliminate any drought pretty quickly. But this year, I think we may have some lingering drought conditions due to the slow start to the rainy pattern. Now, we do have some rain in the forecast the next several days, at least chances of rain increasing some. So hopefully that'll provide some relief. All right, so let's move on to the outlook now for what's coming up here. So as far as general rainy season conditions, we're talking, a typical summer day, let's say in southern Florida, high temperatures, at least upper 80s. In most areas, we're going to be somewhere in the 90s. Low temperatures, not really getting much below 75. In fact, there are many days in the summer where we struggle to get below 80. And that's accompanied by usually high levels of humidity, which is reflected by near constant dew points well into the 70s. And these are the conditions, along with other conditions, that are conducive for daily or near daily showers and thunderstorms, mainly over the land areas during the daytime hours or in the afternoon, and then we see some of that over the water, adjacent water areas in the night and the morning hours. So the rainy season officially started last week on May 15th, and it ends on October 15th. So these dates are based on, these fixed dates are determined based on an analysis of when the rainy pattern, when the dry and rainy patterns began and ended over a 40 to 50 year period. And then so these dates are pretty close. Most years they're going to be pretty close to when the rainy pattern begins and ends. It applies to the southern part of the Florida Peninsula. So, let's say, for example, areas in central Florida, let's say well north of Lake Okeechobee, the rainy season there can start maybe a little bit later on average. It could even be as late as June 1. But so we're talking the southern part of the Florida Peninsula. And there is almost every year, and I think this year we're kind of seeing that, is that we have transition periods where it's not a clean start or a clean end. We can have already some kind of hints of the rainy season beginning as early as 2 or 3 weeks before, or the opposite pattern where we could hang on to dry conditions for maybe another week or 2 weeks after the beginning of the rainy season. And the same thing can happen at the end of the season. So when we look at determining these start and end dates, we look back at previously observed conditions, historical conditions, and we particularly look at things such as the amount of atmospheric moisture. So we measure that via a variable that we call precipitable water. So this is the reflection of the amount of moisture in the atmosphere. So in the area, in that green box bounded by May and October, so those lines increase, that's increasing atmospheric moisture. So historically speaking, we see that increase in moisture between the months of May and October. So this is data that we collect from our weather balloons, and these weather balloons are able to measure the amount of moisture in the atmosphere. So that's where this data is coming from. We also have been able to look back at the amount of rainfall coverage broken down by county throughout the year from day to day. And this is an example of one from, let's say, Broward County for a period from 2002 to 2019, which shows the median daily rainfall coverage for that one county. And this is pretty representative of any county in South Florida. So I'm just showing this as an example. So you can see January, February, all the way into the early part of May, those red lines are pretty far down there, which means that the amount of rainfall coverage is pretty low. But look at the green lines, how they jump up. So once we get towards like the middle of May, the median rainfall coverage increases dramatically. Again, it's associated with that typical increase in moisture, atmospheric moisture that we see during the month of May, which again leads to these rainfall, to the increase in rainfall coverage. So the black lines there, inside the black lines, that's the rainy season. So you can see it coincides very well with the increase in rainfall coverage for Broward County as one example. And this is the same graph, but showing now Collier County. I mean, I could show every county in South Florida, it'd be looking almost exactly the same. But in the interest of time, I'll just show you a couple of examples. And again, here you can see how it's consistently centered right during the bulk of the rainy season. That's where you see the highest coverage of rainfall across each of our counties here in southern Florida. So these are average rainy season total. So these are 30-year averages. So yeah, again, so I have some specific locations there inside that text box, and then just more general ranges to the right. So this is pretty much, I would say, about a 60 to 70% of our total rainfall during a year. So in an average year, about 60 to as much as 70% of our average rainfall will occur during this 5-month period. So that's certainly a befitting of the name of the name of the season. We call it the rainy season. So if somebody were to ask, what does a typical summer day look like in South Florida as far as what it looks like as far as rainfall is concerned? Well, the nature of a typical day is for scattered day-to-day showers and thunderstorms. So in other words, not the entire area being blanketed at the same time by showers and thunderstorms, but scattered. Some areas maybe seeing some higher concentration than others, but at least some level of showers and thunderstorms across the peninsula. And so because of that, and because of the unique geographical features that we have, things like sea breezes from the Atlantic, sea breezes coming in from the Gulf every afternoon. Lake Okeechobee itself influences and has its own breezes that can interact with the sea breezes. The thunderstorms themselves create outflows or gust fronts that can also interact with these sea breezes and lake breezes. So that's why we often see a lot of variability in the rainfall from even over very close areas or closer proximity to each other can have pretty widely different rainfall amounts over the course of time. So that's one reason why the long-range predictability of summer rainfall can be difficult, because of this wide variability. So, when we say, for example, that it's likely that we'll have above normal precipitation, that may be true for most areas, but there can be a few areas that, for one reason or another, didn't get as much rainfall, and they may actually end up being near or even below normal rainfall. And the same can happen, of course, on the other side, too. There's typically 3 rainy season phases. It doesn't mean it always works out this way or is as clean or as predictable as it looks here. But for the most part, in most summers, most rainy seasons, we have the first, let's say, 6 to 8 weeks or so, which pretty much from now all the way into early July, that tends to be our stormiest phase, where we, in addition to having showers and thunderstorms, that's when we have the highest frequency of strong to severe thunderstorms, where these are storms that have the potential of producing strong, damaging winds, like 50, 60 or more miles per hour, tornadoes, hail, and flooding. So this can happen at any time during the rainy season, but it seems to be, or at least based on history, it's more likely to occur during the early part of the rainy season. Once we get to the beginning or sometime in July, sometimes lasting well into August, that's usually the hottest time of the year, but it's also the time of the year when the subtropical high from the Western Atlantic can set up, and it tends to it can cut down on the intensity of the storms, but it can still give us, a lot of rain. But it's also the time frame where there can sometimes be a lull or actually a low point in rainfall or precipitation during the rainy season. So July is actually our driest wet season month, if you will, for that reason. That's also the time frame when we're more likely to have our Saharan dust episodes. These are areas of Saharan dust that actually travel westward all the way across the tropical Atlantic and can make it into the southern United States, including Florida. And that can act as a stabilizing influence, preventing widespread showers and thunderstorms from developing. Then we get to the latter part of the last stage or phase of the rainy season, usually about the last 8 weeks or so, from late August through mid-October. That's when our precipitation can be quite even more variable. And it's due to any impacts from tropical systems, which of course that coincides with the peak of hurricane season, and also any early season fronts that start to come down to the peninsula, especially in September and October. Okay, so just like with any outlook, we always talk about the El Nino Southern Oscillation, or what we call ENSO, as one of the main factors that we look at. So for this wet season, we've seen already the end of La Nina. So La Nina started last fall, went through the winter, and it diminished here basically during the spring months. So we are now officially in what we call a neutral pattern, and that pattern is determined by the sea surface temperature changes relative to normal in the Pacific Ocean. So these water temperatures in the Pacific Ocean have an influence on weather patterns worldwide, and that's what we measure and what we call the El Nino Southern Oscillation. So we're in the neutral phase of the El Nino Southern Oscillation. So what's coming up next? What do we think how could this evolve here during the summer and into through the end of the rainy season? So we are in a neutral conditions right now. In other words, neither El Nino or La Nina, and those neutral conditions are favored for most of the rainy season. So that the gray bars there, that's indication of neutral, neither La Nina nor El Nino. Now, once we get to, let's say, September, October, November, so let's say the tail end of the rainy season and also the last 3 months of the hurricane season, we start to see the chances of La Nina, which are the blue bars, come back up a little bit. So it's near 40% actually by October. So we can't totally rule out the possibility of La Nina maybe making a return, especially late in the season. And as far as El Nino, which is the opposite pattern, right now, pretty low chances, it's about 10 to 15% of that coming during the rainy season. So these are different models that we look at that project what the sea surface temperature changes are in the Pacific Ocean, and in turn indicate to us what phase of ENSO we could be in. And there's wide differences. There have some models that are showing above normal water temperatures reflective of potential El Nino conditions. And then we have some that are showing cooler than normal waters, reflection of La Nina conditions. So averaging those out, we come up with right down the center line, zero, or zero difference from normal, which is why we think that the neutral conditions are more likely to prevail through the summer and into the fall. But we do know always that the uncertainty increases the farther out in time we go. We use several tools when it comes to making these outlooks. So we use the outlook, the official outlook, of course, from NOAA's Climate Prediction Center, which is what we're basing our outlook on, which in turn is based on a combination of looking at long-range climate models, trends over the last 10 to 20 years. In other words, what has actually occurred over the past 10 to 20 years of rainy seasons, which have been primarily warmer and wetter than normal. And then we look at what we call analogs, or past years in which similar conditions to what we're seeing now occurred. So try to match up this year with what's occurred in the past under similar conditions. So I'm going to step through a few of these here pretty quickly. So looking at the model, so these are models that actually make projections out in time of what category we'll be in as far as temperature precipitation, whether it'll be below normal, above normal, near normal. The latest long-range models actually are indicating a slight lean towards a drier than normal rainy season. That's what these two graphics here show. The first one on the left is for June, July, and August. The one on the right is for August, September, and October. When you look at temperature, everything is either orange or red across the United States, which means there's a high probability of above normal temperatures. And actually, we're pegging that at 80% or greater chance of at least a little bit above normal, temperature-wise, throughout the entire summer and rainy season. And this matches up well with the trends. So when you look at, what's occurred over the last, over the course of time, over the period of record of weather observations, from about 1980 or so onward, which is what that red area there on the right side of that graph is, that's showing that since about 1980, we've been having warmer than normal summers. Not every single summer, but the trend has certainly been there for warmer than normal summers, and that trend has actually increased just in the last 10 years or so. You can see how the lines have really shot up there in that tail end of that graph there on the right-hand side. When it comes to precipitation, the green areas there are areas of, again, or years of above normal summer precipitation. So over the last, let's say, roughly 30 plus years, the tendency has been for wetter than normal summers. Not that every summer has been wetter than normal. We actually have had several below normal summers during that 30-year period. But the general trend, again, generally speaking, has been for above normal summer rainfall. And the same applies to the Everglades in Southwest Florida. So I'm going to show these real quick. It's virtually identical to what I showed you for Southeast Florida in the first two slides. So trends point towards warmer than normal summer conditions as well as wetter than normal. So we've looked at two legs of the stool, right? We looked at the models and we looked at the trends. Okay, so what about the analogs or past years with similar conditions? So these years that I picked here, 1996, 1999, 2006, 2008, 2011, and 2017 have conditions across generally the subtropical Atlantic and including Florida and the Gulf that have fairly similar water temperature conditions as well as atmospheric conditions to what we're seeing now. So how did those rainy seasons look? From a precipitation standpoint, they actually ended up a little bit above normal. That's what those blue colors represent across South Florida. From a temperature standpoint, they actually were leaning a little bit below normal, not by much, just very slight. So you can kind of get a sense here, using the different tools, how do we, bring all that data together in order to make an outlook? So it's not every tool is always going to point in the same direction. We're going to have some variability. As we've seen, there are some differences here. The models are showing below normal precipitation, and the analogs are showing below normal temperature, whereas all the other tools are showing the opposite signs for temperature and rainfall. So putting it all together, the Climate Prediction Center this is the outlook from the Climate Prediction Center for the first 3 months, June, July, and August, leaning towards above normal. So notice those probabilities are not that high. They're leaning above normal when you consider the three possibilities, right? Above normal, equal chances, and below normal. We're leaning a little bit towards above normal, but not by much. From a temperature standpoint on the right there, we are more confident. There's actually, we're calling that likely above normal temperatures, 50 to 60% chance of that. Now, going to August, September, and October, the latter part of the rainy season, very little change. From early part of the from the early part of the wet season, showing leaning above normal, around 40% chance, and likely above normal for temperatures. To give you an idea of how these probabilities compare, here's a snapshot of the June to August for 3 locations, and this is really representative of the entire region. So we have Miami, West Palm Beach, and Naples here. Notice for the temperatures, which are the pie chart, the top pie chart, it's showing above normal temperature probabilities of 55, 53%. It doesn't mean that the below normal and near normal are 0. It means that we got to fill out that 100% with the other 2 ranges. So the other 2, the near normal has about a 1 in 3 chance of occurring. So while it's more likely to have above normal temperatures, it's certainly within the realm of possibility that we can have near normal temperatures, which is right now is about a 1 in 3 chance. When you look at the precipitation, the bottom pie charts, those numbers are much closer. So, like say, for example, Naples, the probability of above normal precipitation in June, July, and August is about 40%. But the chance of near normal is 33%, and below normal is 27%. Not a big difference between those 3 ranges, but slightly favoring the above normal. So this is one way to use the percentages in these outlooks. The outlook, this map here, shows you the more likely condition. It doesn't mean that this is guaranteed to happen. So putting it all together for our outlook here, we are leaning towards above normal precipitation. And again, I think this is based primarily on trends. That's probably the indicator that has been the most reliable one over the last 10 to 20 years. But we are still seeing this late dry season dryness, and it's likely to linger for at least a few more days, maybe even the rest of the month. We'll see how the rainfall materializes here over the next several days. But if we don't get too much rainfall over the next few days, we're still going to see this continuation of the drought or near drought conditions probably into June. So I think we're going to have to be ready for the possibility of extended dry periods lingering, and maybe even having some this summer, especially with the late start to the rainy season pattern. So the confidence with the forecast, with at least the precipitation outlook, I would say this year is lower than normal, based on the late start to the rainy season, or the late start to the rainy season pattern, and also a little bit of mixed signals from some of our tools. Now, from a temperature standpoint, we're more confident here. The trends have been pretty solid on above normal temperatures. And one of the contributors, not the only one, but one of them is warmer than normal sea surface temperatures. That we're seeing that again this year. Maybe not as warm as what we've seen the last 2 summers, but still the water temperatures in the subtropical Atlantic and around Florida are warmer than normal. So the confidence in this outlook is medium to high. Okay, so I'm just going to spend a couple minutes here reminding us of some of the hazards that we can typically experience during a summer, during a rainy season here in South Florida. So can't forget about hurricanes, of course. We know hurricane season starts here on June 1. Tomorrow is when NOAA releases the outlook for the 2025 season. But we have to be ready, just like any year. We know that the number of storms overall in a given season only tells us part of the story. We just don't have any real skill in predicting individual storms, the tracks and the strength of a storm that could develop late in the season. At this point in time, we just don't have enough information for that. So we need to be ready, just like any other season. Lightning, of course, thunderstorms means we have lightning. So we need to make sure that people are aware of the threat, even if it's something that occurs that's a fairly routine thing like lightning is in South Florida. We can't take it for granted, because we average every year 2 deaths and 9 injuries in South Florida from lightning. So, we definitely want to keep those numbers as low, or really we want to eliminate that as much as we can. So getting that word out and having people being aware of the dangers of lightning and what to do to stay safe from lightning. As I mentioned before, tornadoes and strong, severe thunderstorms with gusty, damaging winds and hail is also a threat during at least part of the rainy season. And again, mainly during that first 6 to 8 week period. Flooding can occur on any day. You don't need a big weather event in order to get localized flooding with any of our strong summer thunderstorms. And we also get a good number of waterspouts. We average about 25 to 35 per year that are reported in our near shore waters during the rainy season. So I'm not going to go through these too much. Just these will be included in the slides that we'll send out to everyone afterwards. Tornado safety, gotta heed those warnings. So when a tornado warning is issued, that means take action. One thing I'll add here is that we want to make sure that everyone has multiple ways of getting weather alerts. We just don't want to rely on one method. For example, people, we all have our favorite apps and programs or apps that we use to get weather information and weather alerts or warnings. But we want to make sure that we have a redundant means, that we have, maybe a few at our disposal, because these are not foolproof. Sometimes one system may be late in sending a warning, or maybe not send it at all. So we want to make sure that we have as many ways as possible, multiple ways of receiving weather alerts. We talked about lightning. There is no safe place outdoors. There's nothing we can do safely outside that'll minimize our lightning or risk of being impacted by lightning. So the number one safety tip is head indoors. When thunder roars, go indoors. Flooding, the main message here is that water's covering a roadway. Don't assume it's shallow enough to safely drive through. We can't underestimate the power of water. Even if it's rather still water, if it's deep enough, that can cause vehicles, damage to vehicles. And of course, there can be situations where if it's raining enough, hard enough, and the rainfall rates are high enough, you can have rain actually exceeding capacity for even streets and roadways to hold water, and that water can then extend into properties and structures. We talked about hurricanes. Rip currents, also something that unfortunately occurs during the summer months, especially during our holiday periods. And last, and certainly not least, heat. Hottest time of the year, of course. And especially this week, we are actually entering into a pretty hot period here. We're actually expecting record highs, potentially in some areas. These are daily record highs today and maybe tomorrow. So this is the time of year when we start to get heat indices reaching dangerous levels. So if people are not taking appropriate actions, they can become victims of heat exhaustion, heat illness. And the main thing here, one of the main things here also is heat safety when it comes to checking the backseat of vehicles. Make sure we don't leave children and pets unattended. So some heat safety tips. And these are the tools that we use to assess heat and the heat risk, right? We have the heat index, which is the traditional one that we've been using for many years. It simply combines temperature and relative humidity. We also have the wet bulb globe temperature, which is used for healthy, active outdoor activities. For example, athletics, military exercises, for example. And then we also have heat risk, which is a relatively new and experimental tool that we're using as well, which combines weather, or which combines temperature and humidity conditions with historical heat impacts from the CDC. So it's actually combining weather and health. Okay, that pretty much wraps up my part of the presentation here. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of this
Captain
here.
Mike Kirshner, Palm Beach Sheriff's Office.
And now, okay, so I'm going to stop sharing here. So again, we're going to open up the line for questions right at the end here. But now I'm going to hand it off to Medahel, and he's going to talk about the outlook from the South Florida Water Management District perspective. So Medahel, take it away. It's all yours.
Yeah, thank you.
Good morning. Just mic check. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Just give me a second. Are you seeing my full screen?
Yes.
Yes, I am.
Okay, great.
We are.
So I'm going to give you the water condition summary. As Robert said, Marahel Ansar, I'm the Bureau Chief for Hydrology and Hydraulics of the South Florida Water Management District. Sliding is not advancing for us. Okay. Just the first slide, I'm going to just reiterate some of the things that Robert shows as far as the rainfall. Obviously, we had a dry season. This is just looking at rainfall from a different angle, month to month. What I'm showing here is essentially showing rainfall from 2023 to 2025, but I'm going to focus primarily on the dry season in 2025. You can see from this figure that starting since November, we have been below normal, showing a deficit, with April being the month where we had the highest deficit, over 2 inches. November was also very dry. Just some key statistic from our meteorologist. The total rainfall, as Robert mentioned, is around 60% of normal. And then November and April are just super dry month. April actually finished in the top 10 driest months since 1932. Looking at it aerially, what I'm showing here is the rainfall for last month, and then rainfall for the entire dry season to the right. So the mid-May rainfall did help somewhat. So that was obviously very welcome news to get some of that rain. It helped a lot in Upper Kissimmee Basin in particular, and it shows for the first 2 weeks, we had actually about 130% of normal, again, for the first 2 weeks of May. That, again, was mainly north of the lake and Upper Kissimmee Basin. If you look at the picture to the right, that is showing basically rainfall for the entire dry season, and this is showing it basin by basin. And I think Robert showed this earlier, but it's really showing how dry it has been south of Lake O. We've been around 40, maybe 45% of normal in the EAA, Upper Palm Beach County, and then Southwest Coast. And then Upper Kissimmee, we are in the 60%, close to 70% of normal. ENP and the Florida Keys actually fare better than any other group, close to a 75% of normal. Again, this is for the entire dry season. The good news is, like I said, we had some rain in mid-May that helped, and our meteorologists are also predicting at least some rain starting tomorrow, so that's always welcome news for this time of the year. Starting tomorrow, we expect to see some showers, and they're projecting somewhere around an inch, aerially speaking, at least around Lake Okeechobee and Lake Okeechobee service area and Lower Kissimmee Basin. It's really centered, it looks like, around Lake O, and then it tapered down as you move away from Lake Okeechobee. But certainly that's welcome news, and we'll see how that rainfall pan out. Now I'm going to go through our different water bodies and how we're doing, starting with the north and going south. So I'm going to be showing a lot of busy graphs, but I'll try to explain what they really mean. These are regulation schedules. Those are those red line that you're looking at, just starting with Lake East Toho. A regulation line is basically something that helps us make a decision as far as what type of operation we need to make. When we are above that red line, we are basically in what we call Zone A, and normally we'll be doing flood control operation when we are above that red line. when we are below that red line, we'll be doing water supply operation or some ecological releases. And that's really what's happening right now, this time of the year. We are mostly doing water supply operation or some ecological releases. For East Toho, you can see that the blue line and red lines, those are actual gauges that are on those lakes that give us information on how we're doing. And you can see those gauges are basically trending downward towards the lowest end of the regulation schedule, the lowest end of the red line. The idea there is to basically bring down those lakes down to their minimum level from the regulation schedule standpoint to build storage for the upcoming wet season. So in a nutshell, we are really on track at this lake to hit that minimum by June 1st. And by the way, the line we are following that is basically a snail kite recession line from our scientists. It's a line that we follow for some ecological reason for snail kite nesting purposes. Same thing on Lake Toho. You can see that we're following the snail kite recession line, and we are on track to get to that minimum level by June 1st. There's a little drop here in the stages a few days ago. That's just wind. It's not really specific operation per se. We had some wind blowing over the lake, and that show instantaneously some changes to the gauge level there. Moving down south to Lake Kissimmee. In Lake Kissimmee, we are in what we call Zone B. We are about maybe a foot and a quarter above floor. We are making some limited releases out of S65. That's the outlet structure from Lake Kissimmee, about 400 CFS. Again, those are ecological releases for Kissimmee River downstream. Istapoga, we are in great shape. We are maybe about a foot and a half, close to a foot and three-quarter above the floor. It's just slightly below schedule. We've been making water supply releases on and off to the Indian Prairie Basin, just depending on water supply need. But as of yesterday, the releases were zero. Again, they go up and down just depending on water supply need downstream. Moving on to Lake Okeechobee. On Lake the recent rainfall certainly helped. What I'm showing here is a pretty busy graph, but essentially what is showing different traces of Lake Okeechobee level for different year, mostly recent year and the current year. The current year is in black here. And then we were at about 11.12 feet NGVD as of May 19th, a couple of days ago. You can see a little bump from mid-May rainfall that certainly helped. Right now, Lake Okeechobee is about 4/10 of a foot above what we call the water shortage management band. That's a band when we hit it, we start doing supply side management. We start basically operating Lake Okeechobee differently and focusing on permitted user and water supply solely. Right now, we haven't hit that water shortage management band. Like I said, we're about 4/10 of a foot above it. And the Corps has been operating Lake Okeechobee following what they call Lake Okeechobee recovery operation, and Major Bell will get into that after my presentation. Now, switching to the projection, before I get into the projection, I'd like to just clarify that this projection were made early May, so they do not include the recent rainfall we had in mid-May. They will obviously not include also the rainfall that's projected next week. So things should shift a little bit upward for the next projection, but I just want to put that out there before I talk about the projection. So essentially to do a projection, we ran a regional simulation model that essentially is run for multiple decades using current operation and current infrastructure and future and historical rainfall. And results from that regional model are basically used to produce statistics like what you're seeing here. And those statistics are also conditioned by the climate, meaning if climatological forecasts are showing below normal or above normal rainfall, those are baked into those projections. And essentially what they're showing is there is a 50% chance that we're going to be basically riding this line between Zone D and the water shortage management band for a foreseeable future, at least for the next few months. Again, I expect this line to shift a little bit upward simply because of the recent rainfall and and also the forecasted rainfall. Now moving south to the water conservation areas, WCA1 is actually in great shape. It's just slightly below schedule. It's about 1.75 feet above the floor. The S10, which are the outflow structure from WCA1, are closed. We're not making, the Corps is not making any releases there. WCA2A and WCA3A are below floor, but they're just slightly below floor. The recent rainfall helped a lot in those water conservation areas, especially WCA2A. A few weeks ago, we were up to almost a foot below floor in 2A. Now we are only about 1/3 of a foot below floor in 2A, which is great. Again, that just shows how much the recent rainfall had helped in that area. The S11 are closed. Those are the structure that move water from 2A to 3A. In WCA3A, the only releases we are making are limited releases at S33, 33N. Those are structures that discharge into what we call L29 canal and send water to Everglades National Park. That's just for the water control plan. Other than that, everything else is pretty much closed. It's dry out there, just waiting for the start of rainfall to hit us with the upcoming wet season. Now shifting to groundwater, again, the picture is looking better compared to a couple of weeks ago prior to the mid-May rainfall. What I'm showing on the left here is the rainfall we received last month. Again, showing those blue color to the north of the lake. That helped a number of groundwater wells. Normally this time of the year, you want to see a lot of green on this map. And by the way, green is basically mean those wells are normal, blue is above normal, and then black here is well above normal. And then orange is below normal, red is well below normal. So what you like to see again is a lot of green and blue as you transition into the wet season. You don't want to see too wet, but you want to see at least enough wetness that the groundwater is still able to maintain the desired stages in the canal system and having water for the municipality. Most of the urban area use groundwater for their water supply, and we use our canal system to help in that process by basically closing the coastal structure. We call them salinity structure, and they basically hold the water upstream so that we don't have saltwater intrusion impacting the well fields. So looking at groundwater again, the picture looks good for the southeast coast, northeast in the upper east coast area, as well as in the upper Kissimmee Basin. There are areas in BCB area that are showing some red. That's typical of this time of the year. Sometimes it takes longer for some of those aquifer to recharge. Of course, it's been very dry, but once it starts raining, some of those will start showing the green color, although it will take some time before that happens because, like I said, those aquifers do not respond quickly to rainfall, relatively speaking, compared to the superficial Biscayne aquifer, for example. But in a nutshell, groundwater-wise, we are doing well, except for few locations for this time of the year. This is what we like to see. In terms of getting ready for the wet season, obviously, as we go through the latter part of the dry season, we got to start thinking about how do we get ready for the upcoming hurricane season. So we do a number of things during the dry season. I listed a number of them. The key things we do is we complete pre-season inspection of a flood control asset, canal, structure, pump station. We wrap up any seasonal overhaul or readiness that we need to do for operation. We conduct a hurricane exercise. In fact, we just did one yesterday, and it went really well. So that's just an exercise where we simulate an actual hurricane, and then we operate the entire system from our emergency operations center and just make sure everybody's ready when we have a storm coming our way. We also do what's called a full mode switch test. That's essentially operating the system from a remote location. In case we have an unfortunate event where our headquarters is getting direct heat, we want to be able to operate this system remotely from an alternate location. As most of you, or maybe all of you, are aware, we operate our system remotely, and we have a control center. We have our own microwave tower system where we see what's happening at every structure that is on our telemetry system, and we can operate gates and pump station from here, open a gate and turn on a pump that may be miles and miles away. But we need to test that system every year and also test it at a remote location. And that's what we did recently. Again, we call it a full mode switch. That's just to be ready in case we get a direct hit. We also assure communication line are open between us and 298 district and local government. The 298 district are the secondary drainage district that discharge water to us. We operate with a primary system, but there is a 70, maybe 75 plus secondary drainage district that we serve, and they send water to us. We need to make sure who they are, who's in charge for this particular year, who we need to be talking to, who's going to be talking to us when a storm is approaching. So those discussions are happening, that those communication are happening, and making sure that everybody know who may be calling in the middle of an event. Of course, we do coordination with internal group and other agencies on specific wet season operational strategy. Just to summarize, for the wet season outlook, water levels in the smaller Upper Kissimmee Basin Lake are at schedule. Water level in East and Toho are following the Snell Kite recession line, and we are on track to get to the minimum regulation schedule stages by June 1st. Lake Okeechobee has stabilized somewhat, at least since the mid-May rainfall, and those levels are about 4/10 of a foot above the water shortage management band. WCA 1 is about 2/10 of a foot below schedule, but well above the floor, at about 1.5 foot above floor. 2A and 3A are about 1/3 of a foot below floor elevation and are lower than their seasonal median level. Except for the Mother Day weekend rainfall event, the system has been operated primarily in a water conservation, water supply mode. We've been making mainly water supply releases to the EAA, some water supply releases to the Miccosukee tribe, I think at G409. We had some water supply releases out of the WCAs. I think most of those have been stopped now. The canal system are in good shape there, but the condition warrant that we might be able to release some water from WCA 1 and maybe WCA 2 as well. The only thing is the WCA 2 and 3A, for us to release water, because they are below the floor elevation, water control plan call for us to send equivalent amount of water from the upstream basin. That would have to be WCA 1, since that's the one that's well above the floor. Direct or indirect impact from the tropical system affecting Florida can change things for us. Right now, we are focusing primarily on balancing the need to conserve water for water supply, at the same time make sure that the system is ready for the onset of a wet season. So as we get towards the latter part of the dry season, that's when we have to maintain the canals high for water supply purposes, but you also don't want to be surprised by a big storm event, because when those canals are high, that's when they're more vulnerable to cause flooding. So it's that balancing act for this time of the year, and just making sure that we softly transition from this dry condition to wet condition if we start getting some rainfall. In a nutshell, the system is ready for the hurricane season. As far as dry condition, we are watching things carefully. So far, LACO is doing fine, but obviously, as we get closer to the water shortage management band, we have plan in place to act if need be to switch to either a drought condition or a flooding scenario. So again, it's that time of the year where things can shift one way or the other, and our approach is to be ready for both scenarios. And that's what I have. I don't know if you have any question for me.
All right, thank you, Madahel. What we'll do is we will we will hand it off to Major Corey Bell. We're glad to have him with us today. He's with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and he's the Deputy Commander for South Florida. So, Major Bell, I see your slide. If you want to go ahead and take it away.
Alrighty. So good morning, folks. I just want to go over the system real quick. So as we looked at, we began recovery operations for Lake Okeechobee on the 7th of December. We are still conducting those operations, and when we officially move into the wet season, that's when operations will move into standard operations under LOSUM. Currently today, the lake is sitting at 11.06 feet. So we dropped over just roughly 0.6 of an inch, hundredths of an inch yesterday. We continue to stay within the ecological envelope and above the water shortage band. This is just a quick snapshot of where we are on our metrics on how we measure success on our recovery operations that we started. So we're roughly 36 days under 12 feet and 25 under 11 and a half. So you can kind of see the percentages there in a pie chart that kind of represents that. For the remainder part of the season, we do not expect any major issues with water supply. We continue to support South Florida and our state and federal agencies when it comes to LACO and management. We rely heavily on South Florida's comments and concerns with water supply as we move forward. But I'm happy to be a part of the team, and I'll start taking questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Major Bell. Appreciate your contributions to the outlook and also to Matahel as usual. So let's go ahead and let's open up. We have some time for some questions and answers. So you can unmute your mic, or at least we'll make sure they have people have the ability to unmute themselves. If you want to ask the question verbally, or alternatively, you can enter it in the chat, and any one of us will answer the question. So we'll go ahead and kick that off now.
Hi, everyone. This is Andrew Shipley at Fox 4. Two questions. One directed more towards South Florida Water Management District. Obviously, here in Southwest Florida, you showed it as well. Our groundwater definitely is below average. It's been said by some of your folks in the district that too many straws are in the aquifers, plus mid-Hawthorne and Sandstone. Is there any hope for those to gain what they need to gain to put them in a better situation? And then towards the Army Corps, we've also heard that there's not enough flow down the Caloosahatchee from an ecological standpoint for oysters and seagrass. Is there any hope for you guys to increase that flow? Thank you.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, you are asking if there is any hope for us in Big Cypress area? Is that may have?
Well, the question I'm asking for South Florida Water Management District is, mid-Hawthorne aquifer here in the Cape, as well as Sandstone out in Lehigh. We've been told that there's too many straws down into the aquifer, and that's why there's water shortages here. Obviously, those need to be replenished because they're down near dangerous levels for permanent issues with those aquifers. Are we projected to get the rain that we need to put those in a better position?
Okay, so in terms of rainfall projection, what I can speak about is basically the short-term forecast that our meteorologists provided. I think I showed a slide showing that there is some forecasted rain starting tomorrow. I don't know if that's going to really make a dent to groundwater per se. So that's a short-term thing. Long-term rainfall projection, I will leave that up to Robert. I think he answered some of that, but I'll just let him speak to that.
As we know, right, Andrew, rainfall can be very variable in a typical pattern unless we're being influenced by a large-scale weather system like a tropical system or tropical disturbance or a tropical wave. So we do have, as Matahel mentioned, we do have some increased rain chances the next few days, although I think the focus of at least the greater potential for heavier rainfall might be more towards Lake Okeechobee and maybe on the eastern side of the state, maybe like Palm Beach County and places around that area. I don't know. I'm not sure how high they would be over in the East Lee County area that you're indicating, at least in that general part of Southwest Florida. Long term, yeah, we're going to recover at some point. It's just it's just a matter of when, and that's the tricky part when we're in a situation where we're coming off of a pretty dry season, where with extreme drought conditions over parts of South Florida, and a slow start to the rainy season. It's just a matter of when those consistent rains are going to start kicking in, especially in the areas that eventually feed groundwater down into those parts of Southwest Florida.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, Mr. Shipley, Major Corey Bell. So our targets for lake recovery operations to the west is up to 2,100 CFS. Obviously, we're not flowing that due to possible water shortages over the next several weeks. And we're targeting a 7-day average outflow of S79 at 500 CFS. If you did notice on our website during the rain event a few weeks ago, we did spike over 1,700 CFS. I know that the West Coast stakeholders are concerned about the flow rates, but we're trying to manage a lot of different situations right now, and we're maintaining that 500 CSF target over 7 days at the 79 structure. Over.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
I see a question in the chat. Amy Hernandez is asking a question to the district, to SWMD. I'm going to just read out the question and answer that. In relation to the monitoring of county water gauges, does the district send out email notification with information pertaining to concern related to high water levels in particular area in a county? If so, how and where can we sign up? We don't put out specific report for a specific county. Having said that, we have our data online. Basically, we have a DB Hydro database where real-time data are published for the public consumption. So we can certainly send you the link to that. And each county has different gauges at different locations depending on our infrastructure in county. That's normally what we'll do. We'll send out basically link to our real-time observation that anybody can access. I'll be happy to send that your way. Over.
All right. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, thanks, Amy, for your question, and Andrew as well. Any other questions? Yeah, I know we're a little bit over the noon hour, but we can stick around if there are any additional questions anyone wants to ask for all of us or any of the three of us. All right, looks like people are gradually dropping off. So as we just start wrapping up here, I'm going to put my email address here on the chat. So if you want to reach out to me specifically, feel free to do so via the email address that I just put there. We will take some time here to put the slides together, and we'll send those out to the entire mailing list, the entire NWS mailing list. And I know South Florida Water Management District is going to work on making the video available as well for people to view afterwards. So I know we've got some questions and comments about that. So last opportunity for any questions before we wrap it up for today.
Is now exiting.
All right. Yeah, and there's Matt L just dropped his email address there as well. So please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you to Matt L. Thank you to Major Bell for your continued collaboration on these outlooks. We managed to put it together and deliver it at least twice a year with the wet season outlook, and then we have the one in the dry season, which we'll do sometime in the fall.
Mike Kirshner, Palm
So
Sheriff's Office.
with that, I will wrap it up.
Is now exiting.
Thanks again, everyone, for your time and for your attention with this outlook. And please, again, feel free to reach out to us, and have a good and safe rest of the week and weekend, and stay cool. It's going to be hot out there. Take care, everyone.